France 24's terrorism expert Wassim Nasser obtained an exclusive interview with the head of the group known as AQIM. It took a year to get the interview, and Wassim joins me now here in the studio to tell us what he learned about Abu Obeida, Youssef al-Aanabi, and crucially, to put some of those answers in context for us. Wassim, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, it took you a year to get this interview. Just tell us how you managed to secure it.
Well, actually, yes, it took almost a year since the day I asked for this interview and the day that I got the answers. There was many conditions, meaning that they should. All the questions that I asked should have been included, and I asked for the group to stamp the interview because it's an audio. So for me to be sure that it's Abu Obeida Youssef al-Aanabi who's speaking and he's responsible of what he says, I had to do this, and we have a very short part that we can listen to now.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد فهذه أجوبة على ما تفضلتم به من أسئلة وأعتذر على التأخير الذي حصل وذلك لدواعي أمنية وظروف خاصة.
So, Wassim, you asked him 17 questions, and let's just talk about the answers you got to some of those. You asked him about whether or not his group, al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, was planning to commit any terror attacks here in France. What was the answer to that question?
Well, it was a very clear question. I asked him since al-Qaeda and its Sahel affiliate issued many communiques saying that the war or the confrontation with France is only in the Sahel region and in Africa. So I asked about, are they preparing attacks in France, or is the French soil not concerned with this fight? And he had an answer which is clear. He said Western leaders do not want to acknowledge that the objectives of AQIM and Ijnim with it are only local, which means that he is confirming that AQIM is not preparing any attacks in France and didn't do before. And this is documented by different intelligence services saying that AQIM never prepared attacks in the West, either from Mali or from other African countries. But one very important thing he said, and that we heard in this small, short part that we heard, is that he said that the answers were late to come because of security pressure. Meaning security pressure in Algeria, because he's an Algerian national, and we know that Algeria is being very hard on AQIM and is having results on the ground. So he had a little bit of denial of this security situation, despite the fact that he acknowledged it, meaning the late arrival of the answers. And this is what pushed, actually, AQIM further south into Mali in the mid-2000s.
OK, so the organisation is not planning attacks here in France, but you did ask him about one French national. This is Olivier Dubois, a journalist who's detained in Mali. What did he tell you about that particular case?
Well, actually, it was the first acknowledgement from AQIM that they are detaining the French journalist Olivier Dubois. We had small video footage of Olivier saying that he was detained by AQIM, but this is the first time that they acknowledge it, and it's the second time that I am being told by AQIM, and today now by the head of AQIM, that they did not trap him before they abducted him, because we know that Olivier Dubois was seeking an interview with the AQIM commander, and this is when he got abducted. So this puts an end to what the family tried to do, meaning to say that you cannot invite someone and then abduct him. So they're denying that they invited him, but, which is the most important part of his answer, they opened the door for negotiations. And they say that it's up to France now to make a step toward this negotiation that could lead to the release of Olivier Dubois, the sole French hostage in the world today.
And he's being held in Mali. French troops have withdrawn from Mali, haven't they, after nearly 10 years on the ground fighting jihadist groups there. You asked him whether or not it's a win for his terror group that France has pulled out. What did he say?
He considers that it's a win, And he considers that this retreat of French troops is the accumulation of 20 years of jihad, as he said, but he doesn't acknowledge that actually French troops left after the arrival of Wagner Russian mercenaries and because of the bad relations with the Malian junta. Another thing he said that we are glad that French left Mali, and we are glad too that French left Burkina Faso, which puts a time frame to his answer, meaning they came after the 18th of February, the date when special French forces left Burkina Faso. But at the same time, he puts the Russian involvement in Mali in the same bag as the French involvement, declaring that both are colonial powers, which also puts an end to any eventual negotiation with the Malian junta. Because I also asked this question: are they willing to negotiate with the Malian junta regarding the Russian involvement? So he said the terms of those negotiations is the implementation of Sharia law and the departure of colonial forces, meaning French as well as the Russians.
And we know the group has the capacity to carry out terror attacks in the Sahel region. We've already talked about Mali, for example. But it does appear possibly the group is expanding its influence. It can attack places it couldn't attack before, including places like Ghana.
Yes, and we have a map to visualize this situation, because AQIM, when it went further south to Mali and created its Sahel affiliate, didn't stop gaining in strength and force, since what we see in yellow is al-Qaeda activity, what we see in green is Islamic State activity, and the small white dots are the areas where they fight each other on the border region between Mali and Burkina Faso, as you can see. So you see that activity of al-Qaeda is going all the way through Togo, Benin, and even Ghana, and border region with Ivory Coast. So the group didn't stop expanding. And when I asked him what are the limits of this expansion, he said there is no limit to this expansion, and that the Sahel region is an epicenter today of jihad for him. And he even asked for people to come and join the fight in the Sahel region in the ranks of al-Qaeda, which is also very particular, because it is the first time that such a call is formulated clearly by al-Qaeda, which usually depended only on local recruits from the region, from different countries, but not an open call for everybody to help this jihad effort, as he says, in the Sahel region.
And at the bottom of that map, we can just see Burkina Faso. You asked him specifically about terror attacks that have been carried out in Burkina Faso. What was his response?
Well, I actually asked him, what about the Solan massacre, which we know that it's an al-Qaeda unit which was responsible, and some al-Qaeda sources told me at the time that it's an undisciplined unit of al-Qaeda who did the massacre, despite the fact that al-Qaeda officially denied it. So he once more denied the involvement of his troops, as he say, or his jihadis, in such a massacre. He denied it. He said, I am not informed about this.
One of the big questions with organizations like this, terror organizations like this, is, are they negotiating with governments on the continent? You again asked him that question directly. What did he tell you?
Well, he said yes.
Yeah.
He said yes. He was clear. And we know that al-Qaeda is negotiating. You know, al-Qaeda negotiated at one time with Mauritania, at one time with Niger, still ongoing, at one time also with Burkina Faso before the latest presidential elections. But what he said, and which is actually true, is that each time al-Qaeda adapts its negotiation channels, its negotiation terms to the country and to the people that they are negotiating with, like winning hearts and minds and adapting, meaning doing politics with local powers.
It's been reported before, I mentioned it a bit earlier, that al-Qaeda has been fighting with the Islamic State group. Did you get direct confirmation that indeed that is what they're doing?
Well, this was the first official confirmation from the head of AQIM, saying that there is only war between them and the Islamic State, which is a very blunt announcement. He describes them as khawarij, as we say in Arabic, as deviants, and they don't usually talk about them in these terms. This means that the war will continue until one of the two groups wins. And we know that today that the Islamic State is enlarging the scope of its activity in the Sahel region militarily. Al-Qaeda is doing so militarily and politically, because parts of the local populations today are being bound or obliged to be with one group or another just to survive. And this is what's ongoing in areas like northeastern Mali in Menaka, or even in Ansongo, or even in Burkina Faso, where big battles are happening actually between the two jihadi groups.
Just finally, as you've said, you asked him 17 questions to Abu Obeida. He answered most of those questions, as you've explained, but there's a few that he refused to be drawn on. Tell us what he didn't answer.
Well, he didn't answer a question and a half, if I may say so. My 12th question was about the relation with the Taliban, as we explained, but I included in the question the stand of Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, regarding the relation between the Taliban and the United Nations and the death of Zawahiri in Kabul. So he didn't talk at all about Zawahiri. He didn't acknowledge that he is dead, but he didn't say, no, he is still living. And my 13th question, which had real intellectual interest for me, was for him to explain to me that since he took over the leadership of AQIM, did he take over the seat of his predecessor, Drukdel, in what's called the Hattin Committee, which is like an executive or consultative committee of Al-Qaeda Central. And did he take this role? Did he take the role of Drukdel, which had the same role as, for example, as Abu Ayyad, the Tunisian, like prominent figures of Al-Qaeda Central? And here he didn't answer. He said, I am only a soldier of Islam, as he said. But he didn't deny that the Hattin Committee exists, neither that Drukdel had a seat or Abu Ayyad had a seat in this committee, which is actually information.